Please don't kick me out. The boy said, my dad rode with you, and he told me you'd help. When 12-year-old Justin Hale walked into the Iron Wolf's garage, everything stopped not all at once. Not cleanly. It happened in pieces. The angle grinder shrieked for half a second longer, the sound slicing the air like it didn't realize it should quit. Then it died with a hollow whine. A radio kept playing some low, rolling guitar until someone reached out without looking and snapped it off mid-note. Conversation evaporated. Laughter folded in on itself. 30 men turned, boots scraping concrete, instincts sharpening. The boy stood just inside the open bay door, rainwater pulled beneath him, dripping steadily from the hem of his jeans. One sneaker squelched when he shifted his weight, embarrassed by the noise. He didn't wipe his feet. He didn't apologize. He just stood there, shoulders tight, arms hanging straight at his sides like he wasn't sure what to do with them. Justin's left eye was swollen shut, purple fading into sickly yellow at the edges. The skin beneath it shone, stretched thin, tender. His knuckles were split open, blood dried in uneven lines that cracked when he curled his fingers. There was a tremor in his hands, not fear exactly, but the kind that comes after you've been afraid for too long. Your body hasn't caught up yet. Someone let out a low whistle before thinking better of it. The garage smelled like oil and metal and old heat. Engines ticked softly as they cooled, as if whispering among themselves. Chains hung from the walls, unmoving. Every patch in the room seemed to watch the boy at once. Justin lifted his chin, not defiantly, not bravely, just enough to be seen. His good eye scanned the room, passing over faces that didn't smile. Men built like doors and worn like roads. He swallowed. The sound was small, but loud in the silence. Then he locked eyes with the man at the center. Gray beard, scar along the jaw, a president's patch stitched clean and deliberate, like it mattered where it sat. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice because the room leaned toward him on its own. Justin took a breath that shook on the way in. My dad rode with you, he said. His voice cracked on dad, snapped clean in two before he forced it back together. He blinked hard, as if daring his eye not to betray him, and I don't know where else to go. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed heavy, sinking into the concrete, into the space between men who had learned long ago how to ignore most things. No one moved. A man near the tool bench flexed his hands like he might reach for something or someone, then stopped. Another shifted his weight, leather creaking. Somewhere deeper in the garage, a bike clicked as it cooled, metal shrinking against metal. Justin waited. That was the part no one expected. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He didn't take a step back when 30 sets of eyes stayed on him, without blinking. He stood there, rain-soaked and bleeding, like this was the last place on earth he was willing to try. The man with the gray beard didn't speak right away. He studied the boy the way he studied engines, slow, thorough, noting what was broken and what was still holding together despite the damage. His gaze paused on the bruised eye, the split knuckles, the single soaked shoe dot, something tightened in his chest, sharp and unwelcome. Still, no one said a word. The rules of places like this were written in silence, enforced by habit, and every man in the room knew a line had just been crossed. Justin exhaled, barely. Relief, maybe, or resignation. The door behind him rattled softly in the wind. And in that quiet, oil-scented space, something fragile and dangerous had just cracked open. Whether anyone was ready for it or not, this was a place where rules were unspoken but absolute. No one had ever written them down. They didn't need to be. They lived in muscle memory, in the way hands stopped mid-motion when something felt wrong, in the silence that followed a mistake before anyone decided how to answer it. You didn't ask names here, not unless someone earned the right to give one. You didn't bring problems inside. Problems had a way of spreading once they crossed the threshold, like oil on water. And kids, especially broken ones, didn't step onto this concrete floor and expect to walk back out unchanged. The garage breathed around Justin. Oil hung thick in the air, layered with burnt rubber and the sour trace of coffee that had been reheated too many times. Heat radiated from engines still ticking as they cooled. Metal contracting was soft. Impatient clicks. Chains swayed slightly from their hooks, clinking together now and then like they were testing the quiet. Somewhere, a radio buzzed with static, the antenna bent at an angle no one bothered fixing. It filled the gaps between heartbeats, a reminder that the world outside still existed, even if no one wanted it to. There were 31 bikers in the room, not a clean number, not symmetrical, enough to fill the space without crowding it. enough that Justin had to tilt his head back just a little to meet their eyes. Some leaned against workbenches. Others straddled bikes mid-repair, grease darkening their hands and forearms. A few stood with their backs to the wall, arms crossed, watching in a way that felt less like curiosity and more like calculation. At the center stood Marcus Crowcalder. He wasn't the biggest man in the garage. He wasn't the loudest. He didn't pace or posture or test the moment with bravado. He stood with his boots planted and his hands loose at his sides, like whatever was about to happen would happen, whether he rushed it or not. Crow didn't raise his voice. He never had to. The room bent toward him in small ways, shoulders angling. Conversations dying before they started. Even the static from the radio seemed quieter near where he stood, as if it understood who it belonged to. Justin felt it without knowing why. Several men shifted uneasily. Leather creaked. A bench scraped faintly as someone took half a step back, then stopped. "This is bad," someone muttered under their breath. "He shouldn't be here." Another said, louder, like saying it out loud might make it true. No one disagreed. No one agreed either. Justin didn't flinch. That was the thing that unsettled them most. He didn't back toward the door. He didn't look for permission or forgiveness. He stayed exactly where he was. Feet planted in rainwater and oil stains, gaze steady. Shoulders squared with the stubborn courage of someone who had already lost too much to worry about losing face. The rules pressed in on him from every side. Places like this weren't meant for children. They were meant for men who carried their damage quietly, who learned to keep their pain useful. A kid brought mess. A kid brought questions. A kid brought consequences. Justin brought all of that without saying a word. He waited, not because he trusted them, because waiting was something he was good at. Crow watched him in silence. The room held its breath, not in anticipation, but in recognition. Everyone there knew the feeling of standing somewhere you weren't supposed to be, hoping the ground didn't give way beneath you. Kids didn't belong here. Everyone knew that, especially kids like Justin, and yet no one told him to leave. Crow crouched until they were eye level. The movement was deliberate, unthreatening, a lowering instead of a looming. Leather creaked softly as his knees bent, boots planting flat on the concrete like he meant to stay a while. "Who did that to you?" he asked. His voice didn't carry. It didn't need to. It was pitched low enough that it felt like the question belonged only to the space between them. Justin shrugged. Not careless, not dismissive, protective. It was the kind of shrug kids learn early, the kind that says this isn't worth explaining, and it won't help anyway all at once. His shoulders lifted, then fell, sharp and practiced, like a reflex he hadn't chosen but had mastered. Kids who've learned not to trust adults always do that. Crow didn't push. "Did you fall?" he asked instead, giving Justin an out, a softer story, something easier to carry. Justin shrugged again. This one lasted longer. His shoulders stayed raised just a beat too long before dropping. His jaw tightened, muscles jumping under bruised skin. His fingers flexed at his sides, then curled into fists like he needed something to hold on to. Crow waited. Silence settled in, not heavy, not threatening, just open. Silence does that to children. It gives them room to crack. Justin stared at the concrete between Crow's boots. Oil stains darkening in uneven constellations, old, new, layered over time. He traced one with his eye like it might tell him where to step. "My uncle," he said finally. The words came out flat, stripped of accusation. Just a fact, like the color of the floor or the smell of the room. "When he drinks," Justin added, quieter. "He says I look like my dad." Something flickered across Crow's face. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition. Justin swallowed. His voice wavered once, just once before he forced it steady again, like clenching around a loose thread before it could unravel. "My dad died last winter," he said. "Bike accident." The garage seemed to shrink around that sentence. Crow stayed still. "So did everyone else. Mom before that." Justin continued, the words tumbling faster now, as if momentum mattered. "She got sick. A long time sick." He sniffed hard, then wiped his nose with the back of his hand, smearing dirt across skin already marked by bruises. He didn't look embarrassed. He didn't look like he expected comfort. "Today," he said, voice thinning, "my uncle said I had to leave." Crow didn't ask where. Justin didn't say. Some answers lived in what wasn't spoken. Justin shifted his weight, the wet shoe making that soft, humiliating sound again. He flinched, just barely, like he'd forgotten other people could hear him. "I remember the patch," he said. Crow's eyes dropped. "Just for a second, to the stitching on his vest. Dad used to point it out. Justin went on. Said it meant something. Said you don't ride with people unless they've got your back. His throat bobbed. He said if I was ever in trouble. Justin paused, breath catching, then pushed through. I could find you. The sentence ended without certainty, without demand. Justin finally looked up. His good eye met Crow's, searching not for pity, but for truth, for confirmation that this wasn't another lie he'd been handed to survive on. Today mattered because today was the last door he knew how to knock on. Crow felt it then, the weight of the moment pressing down, quiet and unforgiving. This wasn't a story. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't history. It was a boy standing on cracked concrete, asking if words spoken by a dead man still meant anything at all. And the room waited to see what kind of men they were going to be. No one announced the shift. When it happened, it began with small things, the kind that barely register until you realize they matter. A man near the sink tore a paper towel from the roll and crossed the room without a word. He hesitated just a fraction before offering it to Justin like it might be refused. Justin took it, nodded once, and pressed it against his knuckles. Red bled through almost immediately. Another man disappeared into the back and returned with an ice pack, still half frozen. Condensation slick against his palm. He knelt, not crouched, not looming, and held it out. Justin accepted that too, holding it carefully to his eye, breathing shallow through his nose. A leather jacket was lifted from the back of a chair. It smelled like road dust and soap and something older. Someone draped it over Justin's shoulders, settling it there like it belonged. The sleeves swallowed his hands. The hem brushed his knees, too big, clearly borrowed, warm anyway. Justin stiffened at first, then slowly let his shoulders relax beneath the weight. It felt like being anchored, like being claimed without being owned. Not everyone was convinced. A man near the far wall shook his head, running a hand over his beard. "We can't keep him," he said. His voice wasn't cruel, just honest. "This isn't what we do." No one argued with the truth of that. This place has survived because it knew its limits, because it drew lines and respected them, because men who lived close to the edge learned early not to invite fragility into spaces built for steel. Crow straightened. The movement drew the room toward him the way gravity does. Conversations died. Boots shifted. The paper towel roll still mid-spin. He didn't speak right away. He looked around the garage, really looked, at the men who buried brothers under roadside dirt, at the ones who crawled back from hospitals with scars they never talked about, at faces worn down by time, sharpened by survival, softened in places no one admitted. This stopped being about rules, Crow said finally, voice low, steady. The second that kid walked in, Justin's fingers tightened in the sleeves of the jacket. Crow didn't look at him when he spoke next. He looked at the men who'd built this place with their hands and held it together with loyalty and fear in equal measure. "This is about what kind of men we're going to be," he continued. "Right now, not someday, not hypothetically. Right now." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. Silence followed, not uncertain, but heavy, settled. Someone exhaled. Another man nodded once, almost imperceptibly, like he'd been waiting for permission he hadn't known how to ask for. No vote was taken. There were no raised hands, no objections shouted down, no dramatic declarations. The decision moved through the room the way a current does, quiet, undeniable, binding. A chair scraped back. Someone poured a cup of coffee and set it on the table near Justin, letting it cool first. Another man muttered, "Kids gotta eat," and reached for the phone without explanation. Justin watched all of it with wide, careful eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He didn't say thank you. He just stayed. Crow finally turned to him. "Sit," he said, not unkindly. Justin sat. The jacket pulled around him. The ice pack dripped onto the floor. The paper towel fell apart in his hands, soggy and red and useless, and still, he stayed outside. Rain tapped against the open bay door. Inside, engines cooled fully, ticking, slowing until the garage settled into a different kind of quiet. Whatever this place had been before, it wasn't just that anymore. Justin stayed, and nothing that followed would be accidental. By Monday, the school knew. It started with a call that was supposed to be routine. Attendance flagged, notes compared. A kid who showed up with a jacket that wasn't his and bruises no one could ignore. By mid-morning, the social worker was asking careful questions. By noon, the principal had closed his office door. By late afternoon, a police report existed, not dramatic, not urgent, but real. Word traveled the way it always does in small places, sideways. There were whispers in hallways, glances that lingered too long. Parents spoke in lowered voices at pickup, their concern edged with something less generous. Names were attached to rumors that didn't belong to them. Fear filled in gaps where facts hadn't arrived yet. A biker gang. That poor kid. This won't end well. Justin felt it all, without anyone saying it to his face. He sat straighter in his chair. He kept his answers short. He watched the door more than the board. The jacket stayed on his shoulders even when the classroom warmed, like it might vanish if he set it down. Then, just before first period ended, the sound came. Not roaring, not aggressive. Engines pulling in low and controlled, one after another, until the vibration reached through the windows and into the floor. Heads turned. Pens paused mid-sentence. Someone laughed nervously, like they'd mistaken it for a joke. 30 bikes parked in a perfect line along the curb. Engines shut off almost simultaneously. The sudden quiet was louder than the sound had been. Men dismounted without hurry. Helmets came off and were tucked under arms. No one revved. No one postured. Leather vests caught the light, patches visible, but unprovocative. Just men standing where they were allowed to stand, waiting. Teachers froze. The principal went pale. Justin didn't move. Crow entered the building alone. He signed in at the front desk, wrote his name in clean, steady letters, waited for a hall pass like anyone else. When he reached Justin's classroom, he knocked once before opening the door. 30 sets of eyes tracked him. Crow didn't scan the room. He didn't look for trouble. He went straight to Justin's desk and nodded. "Time," he said. Justin stood. Crow walked beside him down the hallway, not in front, not behind. His pace matched the boys, a guardian, not a warning. The meeting in the office was brief and professional. The bullies were brought in separately. No raised voices, no threats, just men who didn't flinch when lies ran out of places to hide. Just calm statements, clear boundaries, and understanding that consequences were already in motion. "This stops," Crow said once. It wasn't a threat. It was a certainty. Outside, the bikes waited. Students pressed their faces to windows. Phones came out, then lowered again when no spectacle followed. No shouting, no chaos. Just presence quiet, unyielding, impossible to ignore. By lunch, everyone had a new story. Not about danger, not about fear. About a line of bikes that came and left without incident. About a boy who walked taller afterward. About men who showed restraint where others expected violence. By the end of the day, the whispers changed tone. By the end of the week, they changed direction. That was the moment the town stopped whispering. Not because they agreed, but because they understood that something had shifted, and whatever it was. It wasn't going away quietly. Change didn't happen all at once. There was no single morning where everything felt different. No clear line between before and after. What changed came in pieces so small they were easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. It happened in early rides to school, when the air was still cold and the streets were mostly empty. Justin learned which bike had the smoothest idle, which rider leaned just enough in turns to make him grin, which mornings Crow talked and which mornings he didn't. Helmets were always fitted twice, gloves adjusted. No one rode off until Justin gave a nod that said he was ready. It happened in scraped knees, cleaned with the same patience used on engines. Hands that could torque bolts without stripping them learned how to steady a trembling leg. Antiseptic stung. Bandages were wrapped tight at first, then fixed without comment. No one rushed. No one mocked the wince. At night, it happened around a scarred wooden table in the back room of the garage. Homework spread out between coffee mugs and half-disassembled carburetors. Someone always knew the answer, but waited to see if Justin could find it himself. When he couldn't, the explanation came slow, deliberate, like the right way mattered more than the speed. One man quit drinking. He didn't announce it. He just stopped bringing bottles into the building. The first week, his hands shook when he reached for a wrench. The second week, they didn't. The third week, he laughed for real. Surprised by the sound of it. Another man started attending court-mandated meetings. At first, he complained, counted days, marked time. Then the mandate ended, and he kept going anyway. He stopped disappearing for hours. He started showing up early instead of just on time. When someone asked why, he shrugged and said, "Figured I'd finish something for once." Justin learned to sleep through the night again. At first, he woke at every sound: the click of cooling metal, a door closing, the rumble of a truck passing outside. Crow learned to leave a light on in the hall. learned which nightmares needed words and which just needed someone to sit at the edge of the bed until breathing evened out. Justin stopped flinching when voices rose. He started raising his hand in class. He stopped carrying the jacket everywhere, but it stayed close hung on the back of his chair, folded at the foot of the bed, never far enough to feel like it was gone. Crow learned how to cook pancakes without burning them. The first batch went straight into the trash. The second were edible but dense. The third were almost good. Justin pretended not to notice the progress, but he ate every one. Eventually, Crow learned to flip them by feel instead of sight. To wait for the bubbles, to trust timing over impatience. They learned how to exist around one another without tension, how to fill space without crowding it. How to let silence be restful instead of sharp. Justin grew slowly, then all at once. Sleeves that once swallowed his hands crept up his wrists. Shoes were replaced. His voice deepened just enough to surprise him. Confidence settled in his posture. Not loud, not borrowed. The men changed too. They started fixing things they left broken for years. Apologies were made without speeches. Phone calls returned. Bridges rebuilt plank by plank. No one called it family. They didn't need to. They all learned something about patience, about repair, about what happens when you show up consistently instead of dramatically. Time did the rest, quietly. 3 years later, Justin stood at a podium in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit right. The jacket pinched at the shoulders. The sleeves showed too much wrist. Someone had tried to hem the pants and given up halfway. It didn't matter. Justin stood straight anyway, chin level, hands steady where they rested on the wood. His graduation cap sat crooked, tilted slightly to the left like it had never fully agreed to stay in place. The tassel brushed his eyebrow every time he moved his head. He smiled, not wide, not nervous, just steady. The room was full. Parents filled the folding chairs in neat rows, cameras ready, eyes already shining. Teachers stood along the walls, arms crossed, proud and tired in equal measure. At the back, a few men stood instead of sitting, vests clean, boots polished, trying not to look like they were holding their breath. Crow sat in the front row. No sunglasses, no jacket, just a clean vest over a press shirt. His hands were folded in his lap, knuckles white, like he didn't trust himself with applause or motion or anything. That might let the moment slip away too fast. Justin stepped closer to the microphone. It squealed softly. He waited, let the sound settle. When I was 12, he said, voice clear, carrying farther than he expected. I walked into a place I wasn't supposed to be. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the room, not mocking, not dismissive. Recognition. People leaned forward. I didn't know the rules, Justin continued. I just knew I couldn't go back to where I'd been. He paused. Crow didn't move. I thought family was something you lost, Justin said. His voice didn't shake. Something that disappeared when you weren't careful enough. He glanced down at his notes, then folded them and set them aside. But I learned something else. He went on. I learned that family is something you choose. His eyes lifted. He looked straight at Crow. And family, Justin said, is the people who show up. For a moment, the room forgot how to breathe. Crow's jaw tightened. His gaze dropped, then lifted again, glassy but unbroken. Around him, men shifted, cleared throats, stared very hard at the floor. The applause came slowly at first. Then all at once, Justin stepped back from the podium, heart hammering, smile finally breaking wider as he spotted familiar faces, men who taught him how to ride, how to study, how to stay. Men who never asked for credit. The courtroom ruling came later. No one made a speech there. No audience. Just paperwork slid across the table, signatures written in ink that dried quickly and permanently. Justin's leg bounced under the chair until Crow rested a hand on his knee. It still. The judge looked at them over reading glasses and nodded once. That'll do it, she said. The adoption papers were signed without ceremony. None was needed. Outside, the sky was clear. Crow handed Justin the pen. Justin kept it, slipping it into his pocket like a souvenir of something bigger than a moment. They didn't celebrate loudly. They went home. That night, pancakes were made, burned just a little, on purpose this time. Laughter filled the kitchen. Someone told an old story. Someone else listened like it was new. Later, when the house was quiet, Justin stood in the doorway of his room and looked back. Crow was already there, leaning against the frame like he'd always been. Hey, Justin said. Crow nodded. Hey. Nothing else needed saying. The circle had closed not perfectly, not magically, but completely, and everyone in that room knew exactly how they'd gotten there. On Justin's 18th birthday, the garage was quieter than usual. No banners, no cake with candles melting into wax puddles, just the low hum of the lights and the familiar smell of oil and metal and coffee that had long ago stopped being background noise and started feeling like home. Crow waited until the others drifted away, rides to take, errands to run, space given without needing to be asked for. When it was just the two of them, he reached into the inside pocket of his vest. He handed Justin a small bundle wrapped in dark cloth. "Open it," Crow said. Justin did, carefully, like he understood before seeing it that whatever was inside deserved respect. The cloth fell away to reveal a patch, small, worn smooth at the edges. No club name, no rank, no claim, just a symbol, simple, deliberate, unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. His father's. Justin didn't speak right away. His thumb traced the stitching, feeling where time had softened the thread. He inhaled slowly, the way he'd learned to do when emotion threatened to outrun him. Crow watched him without crowding the moment. "Not what you are," Crow said finally. "Just where you came from." Justin nodded. He looked up, eyes bright but steady, and stepped forward. The hug came sudden and fierce, arms wrapping tight around Crow's shoulders like he was afraid letting go might undo everything that had been built. Crow stiffened for half a second, then relaxed, one hand settling solidly between Justin's shoulder blades. Grounded, certain. They stayed like that longer than either would admit later. Outside, the wind rattled the open bay door. Somewhere down the street, a motorcycle passed, engine rising and fading like a memory that didn't hurt anymore. Justin pulled back and smiled. 18 didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a hinge. That night, he pinned the patch inside his jacket, not on the outside, not for display, close to the lining, close to his chest, a reminder that history didn't have to be worn loudly to matter. The garage carried on, as it always would. Engines would be rebuilt, mistakes would be made and fixed, men would come and go, some would stay sober, some would struggle, the world would keep testing the edges of what they built, but something remained. A boy who had walked into a place with rules and been met with a choice. Instead of a door, a group of men who learned that strength wasn't proven by how hard you hit, but by how long you stayed. A truth passed quietly from one generation to the next, stitched into leather and lived out in action. Years later, Justin would tell the story simply. Not about bikers, not about danger. About showing up, about the moment everything stopped and then moved forward differently. So here's the question that lingers. Long after the garage lights dim and the engine's cool, what would you do if a child knocked on your door with nowhere left to go? Rules are easy, presence is harder. Be someone who shows up. And if stories like this matter to you, stay. There are more worth telling.